Hello, welcome back to the Tears of Fire podcast where I go over the Last Dragon Chronicles by Chris DeLacy, and today we're going to be covering chapters 9 through 12 of The Fire Eternal. Thanks for joining. I hope you guys had a safe flight in and hit no turbulence. With that, let's get into the episode. It's going to be a short section. We get some flashbacks this week and a little bit of mysterious going-ons with Alexa, David's daughter. We start out in chapter 9. It's a long chapter again, or a long chapter titled Sea Ice, near the last known location of the island once called the Tooth of... It's kind of a mouthful, but we do start off with the point of view of the bears. One bear in particular, R, is how I've been pronouncing it. If you guys have different suggestions, please let me know. But so we start off with this bear that had been sent on the mission by Ingvar, saying that he needs to find the raven and set free only its head and its legs in order to walk its way to Ingvar himself. As Kalar is walking down, he's reminiscing about the first time he met Ingvar. He had been trudging down and feeling as if he'd almost been dying. When he laid down for what he thought would be his final time, he was greeted by a bear named Avril. As we know, Avril is the descendant from Laurel and Ingvar's chosen teller. He tells Kalar to not give up and he is not going to die here. We get a small interaction between them, with Kalar saying that his time is up, but he's still got plenty of fight left in him. Avril goes around, does some observing, and sees what's hurting this bear. He's slowly being poisoned by oil. He's got oil covering his coat, all on his paws, and I'm assuming it wasn't expressed explicitly, but that Kalar had probably ingested some of this oil. Avril gets flashbacks of himself from when he was a cub with his mother. They were following a boat that was captained by humans, obviously, and Avril's mother told him to try some of the oil, but not to ingest too much of it. She was trying to show him that this was poisoning the planet and this is dangerous stuff, and to be able to identify it later. Throughout this long conversation between Avril and Kalar looks up and he thinks that he's dying because he sees a mirage up on the ice. He can see that there's ice through this portal type thing, but the weather around it is different. It's a much older time. It's very new ice, and the air seems to be filled with something other than just cold. Through this portal, though, Ingvar himself walks in. He tells Kalar that he's in need of both a storyteller and a fighter. He knows that Kalar is the descendant of Ragnar himself, as well as Ingvar. I was unaware of this. We know that Ingvar was part of the line as well, but I don't remember any mentions of him having cubs. But this is still pretty cool. They're having a conversation between each other, and Ingvar decides to heal Kalar. He puts his paw on him and around him and starts burning with the white fire. Kalar notices that there is no melting of the ice, there's no burning sensation around him, but after the fire clears, he's completely clean and back to full strength again. Ingvar goes on to describe that they are going to be working with the goddess Gaia. She is upset and trying to find the balance of the world once again. It's also brought up that we need to work with humans, and Kalar gets confused by this. He's looking at Ingvar and asking questions, saying, aren't these guys the enemies? Ingvar says that they can be a great help, but as of right now, they are. In my notes I just have here, aren't we always? And as Darian and Lucy were saying when they were on, it seems like these books, just like many others back in this time in the early 2000s, rely heavily on climate change, and that we need to be the ones to change it. Otherwise, these animals are not going to have any kind of habitat. After this flashback fades, we're brought to Kalar finding Gulana herself. They don't name her, but he says that he found a raven and a block of ice still frozen in mid-flight form. As he's carefully digging away and trying to chop off pieces of this block, he opens up the raven's head, but he has to be careful because he knows that if he starts to pry too much, the raven is still so frozen that the head might pop off. So he decides to take a nap until she's thawed out enough to be able to talk. But as soon as she does, Gulana just starts throwing slurs, saying that there's these heavy, sealed breath brutes that don't know what they're doing or talking about, and she doesn't need help from any of them. And so Galar just, he decides to wait a second. He knows that there's a bigger storm coming, so he decides to just rest and wait so that it can pass. And then Gulana is asking pretty much what he's there for, why she needs to help whatsoever. Kalar doesn't give her any kind of answers and just decides before he breaks out the legs to start the journey that he's going to rest. That brings us to the end of that chapter pretty quick. From the descriptions of this, I'm not sure if she's supposed to travel back with Kalar or if Kalar is going to be traveling back on his own, leaving the raven in the dust, because obviously a raven that has most of its body still blocked up in ice isn't going to be able to move fast unless Kalar just drags her along with him. I don't really see that happening though. So it'll be interesting to see, but we're going to jump perspectives again and we're going to get into chapter 10, An Evening at Allensdale. This chapter is heavily based on Zanna. We get flashbacks to her early pregnancy, or actually we get flashbacks of her late pregnancy and then even early childhood of Alexa, saying that Arthur has been a big help since he spent a lot of time on Farlow's Island as a monk. He knows how to meditate and bring peace to himself. So Zanna took that practice up with him and seemed to meditate at least a couple times a week with him. Through a conversation with Arthur, she decides to go to poetry night. He's asking her if that she's scared of letting go, or letting go of David, or letting go of herself. She brings up the fact that she already gave Glant to Lexi, and isn't that part of giving up already? As Zanna gets to the poetry night, she sees Tam at a table surrounded by some people, and they're all having a conversation. There's already some people seated at the seats themselves waiting for the poetry to begin. And Zanna has thoughts about him being handsome. He's not wearing his glasses, which takes a little bit of his style away, but does make him look more rugged. And this kind of struck a chord in me. Obviously, like I said last time, I'm not ready for David to be out of the story yet. And even though we still have no mention of him, even in this section, I don't think he's gone. I don't quite remember where he's at or if he even comes back. I could have sworn he did. But then I also got a note in here that Tam better come out with the truth, because there's no good way to start a relationship when it starts with a lie. Obviously, Zanna can have her own priorities and things that she wants to work through, but man, she's going to be devastated when she realizes Tam was only trying to get close to her to speak about David or to find shit out about David. Zanna does bring Mr. Bacon, and before I read the next couple of sentences, I wrote Bacon as a buffer. Good choice. Tam and Bacon have a quick conversation, and Tam asks if Bacon is a fan of poetry, and Bacon basically tells him that he's not a fan of this new age stuff. Good old baby boomer Bacon. Gotta appreciate him. As they're going through, there's not much interaction between Tam and Zanna, other than the occasional lean over when somebody's reading their poetry and saying, "That's too intense," or "That could have been written better." Which is kind of a crazy thing for him to be saying. But after a while, Tam stands up and it's his turn to read. Zanna's taken aback by this, and she's surprised to find that his poetry is moving. It's very emotional, and a lot of it makes sense. By the end of this, Tam has a little gathering at his table, while his poetry itself is being distributed as a book, which means he's published, and good for him. I'm glad he's not just a news writer, but come on, bud. Come on. He titles his book The Fire Eternal as well. And this is a cool little way for Chris to get his own books and his own covers into their stuff. You know, to me, this also reminded me of when shows or movies say their own title in it, and you're like, oh, they did the thing, they did the thing. So that was kind of cool to see. But he goes on to describe that the fire eternal means that it's never ending love. I have a note in here that also says, you know, screw you, Tam, just tell the truth. I'm getting tired of this little facade. He seems like a good guy and seems genuine. Even Zanna says this and brings it up into his poetry, that she can tell that what he writes is earnest. The owner of the bookstore where the poetry is being read comes up to Tam and they're discussing Tam's payment. This bewilders Bacon a little bit, and he's asking him why he gets paid if it's just poetry. And Tam just gives a slight little a slight little side eye. He picks up a copy of David's book, White Fire, and says this will be payment enough. And I just have in here my notes too, is you're playing a dangerous game, man. Dangerous game. He sees that Bacon recognizes it and asks if he read it. Bacon starts to go off and say, read it? No, I did more than that. I got cut off by Zanna, though, and Tam has questions for Zanna. He's wondering if she read it as well, and she said, of course, if it's going to be by a local author, she's going to have to read it, period. At the end of the night, Tam is looking back at Zanna, and he's thinking to himself that he needs to stay professional. There's quite a big description on Tam basically checking out Zanna, seeing how beautiful she is, in the type of dress that she's wearing, the way that her hair is styled, all of the bracelets that she's wearing adds to this figure that he believes is couldn't really be better. But again, he's reminding himself that he's here for a job and he needs to stay as professional as possible. And usually I'm all up for meet cutes and having a good romance, especially if it's, you know, enemies to lovers in a way. But again, you can't start a relationship with a lie, and the fact that Tam is there just to get information on David and he knows what he's doing, screw you, Tam. But that's going to bring us to the end of that chapter. I don't really have too much to say other than, you know, for Zanna to be interested in these two guys, both David and Tam, and they both happen to be published authors. It's pretty cool. She's got a type, and it's writers. Pun intended. Get it? Typewriters? Get it? Always kills the joke when you have to explain it, but I'm sure you guys got it. Alright, it's going to bring us into chapter 11. The door opens. Zanna gets back from a late night, and Lucy is still being an angsty teen. This is making Zanna feel like she can't have an innocent night out where literally nothing happened. She didn't kiss Tam, they didn't even have a serious conversation, and she was brushing Tam off a lot, not giving him the time of day. They did set up a consultation for Tam Wednesday at 12:30, which she asks Lucy to cover for her. So Zanna really does not have any interest in this guy. She doesn't want to be around him, doesn't want to interact with him, which is interesting. One thing I also forgot to mention is that Tam, when he was putting away Xana's book, or not Xana's book, David's book, he missed that the dragon groin is hiding away into his book. I also want to know how he got in there because there was no mention of him hiding in any of Xana's stuff or Zanna putting it in there whatsoever. We do know that groin can be invisible, so if he just kind of hitchhiked a ride with him, that's very possible, but again, there was no mention of it. Before going to bed, Lucy tells Zanna that Alexa was drawing pictures again. Zanna kind of rolls her eyes, saying that this was normal for her. She's been drawing the whole time. But Lucy says that she drew a dragon, ancient dragon, with something in its eye. She tells Zanna that this is something important and she should probably take a look. When Zanna finally gets into the room, she sees Bonington up on the table as well as Gadzooks. She has a quick conversation with them asking if Alexa's been okay. Alexa seems to be having dreams that are not necessarily bothering her, but she's reacting to them. She's kind of squinching her eyes, closing her fist, and Zanna just tells her, it's okay, baby, just dream it, bringing up the same conversation that Liz would have with David when they're trying to picture something. Zanna takes out the picture from Alexa's hand, and she sees that this dragon has very blue eyes. But also in the pupil, there's something drawn in there, something like a star. I also wrote in here that this is something that Chris is doing as well as with his title, like in the previous chapter, that he's getting the covers of his book, because on Firestar they had a dragon with an eye on it, and inside of the eye was the Firestar. Not sure if you guys have been keeping along, but if you look at the covers of the books, in every single book there is something in the pupil. Right now we are in the Fire Eternal, and if you look in the pupil of this golden dragon, he's got an image of the earth in there. Early the next morning, we get the entire household sitting around the table discussing Lexi's drawing. They believe that she's seeing Glant, David's dragon, and that she's getting imaging from the universe. After a little while, Arthur comes in and adds to this narrative. He tells Zanna, after Lucy and Liz take off looking for Alexa, that Alexa is the daughter of a seer, meaning David, and Zanna, a Sibyl. He asked that if David had the ability to write happenings into reality, and Zanna had magical powers, what could their daughter do? Me and Arthur are on the exact same page, man. So I've been saying, as soon as we learned that they were going to have a daughter, I kind of figured that she would have a lot of abilities. And we don't know what these abilities are quite yet, but I'm excited to see. Towards the end of this chapter, though, we get Bonington kind of looking over the garden. Liz had found Alexa over there looking for fairies, but it's too cold. Zanna tells her to come inside, but Bonington's left out there in a snow leopard form. As he comes in, he nudges himself along Arthur, how a cat would, usually with his head, and then kind of body sideswiping when they want attention. The book describes, though, that since both of them had been touched by the Fane, this does a little bit something extra for both. It gives them with a little bit of a commingling effect, and they're able to see what each other had seen. So even though Arthur no longer has his eyesight, he gets to see through Bonington, which is pretty cool. I mean, we had seen that ability slightly with him and Snigger, but the fact that the Fane had also touched Bonington, he gets a little bit more of that connection. Bonington explains that there was, with the winter wind, a ripple that opened a door, and it could be nothing other than air pressure, but that there was also a shimmer of time and space, almost like a portal had been ripped open. And to me, this might explain either growing, or maybe somebody had come back here to check on the dragon's den. My first thought would be David, but again, there's been no mention of this man whatsoever, and it's been kind of disappointing. I'm just waiting for his grand entrance, and if it's not up to par, I'm gonna have to reach back out to Chris and give him a piece of my mind and some thoughts. We jump back into the perspective where we left off with Ingvar and Averill, where they had just summoned the sea goddess Sedna. Averill's a little freaked out, but as soon as he sees her, he's brought back to a flashback to the stories that he knew of Sedna. The story goes as this, and to me, a lot of myths share common strings, especially between cultures that were separated by centuries and oceans and could have no communication whatsoever. I know we've talked about this a little bit, but this story starts off with Sedna being absolutely beautiful. She's from an Inuit tribe. Her father was starving, and there was nothing to trade for. She had rejected every marriage that was proposed to her from every hunter coming back and forth, and she was just enamored by her own beauty, looking at her reflection in the ice and in the ocean. This made me think of the myth of Narcissus from Greek mythology. The myth of Narcissus goes that he was so enamored with his beauty that when he tried to see it with a shield inside of the water, he ended up admiring himself so much that he drowned. Sedna was very much the same. She didn't drown, but her father was getting tired of starving, and so he met a hunter one day that created a magical storm, and he got scared. But he did agree to trade his daughter for a boat full of fish. The man was covered from head to toe, and you could not see his face, but he agreed to this trade, laughing that the father was a fool. When the hunter came back, the father had put Sedna to sleep with a sedative made from a walrus's eyes as well as leathers from his boots, which that soup had to be disgusting, but I mean, if that's all they could eat at the time, it's gnarly. But so Sedna slept for almost a day and a half as this travel took. The father met the hunter at the edge of the shores where there was a big boat of fish, and the hunter took her away. When Sedna finally woke up, she found that the hunter was there. He named her his wife, and that she had to do pretty much anything that he said. He also revealed himself to be the king of ravens, one of the darkest fish he had ever seen. This upset her pretty bad, and so she started screaming into the wind. And she was screaming so much that the wind was able to carry her voice back to her father. Her father then was very heartbroken and guilt ridden that he decided to go try to save her. When he got to the island that was harboring her, she had keen eyesight, almost as close to a bird. So I don't know if the Raven King had been magical and been changing any qualities about her, but it seems that she has some new abilities herself. So Sedna got into the boat with her father, and they started rowing away as fast as they can. They heard a shriek in the sky, and they knew that the Raven King was coming for them. This absolutely terrified their father, and the Raven King kicked up a huge storm. In order to keep his own life, he decided to sacrifice Sedna's, saying, "Here, take back your wife." He threw her into the ocean, and she tried to swim back and grabbed a hold of the boat. Obviously, in the Arctic ice caps, you're going to get hypothermia really quick, and it says that Sedna starts to freeze, but she's begging and begging her father to pull her in. Instead, her father takes the paddle that he was using and starts smacking her fingers. She's pretty frozen at this point, and her fingers start chopping off, and as they fall into the water, they start to turn into seals and whales, and eventually she lets go of the boat, sinking down into the water. It does say that she doesn't die, though, and she made her home amongst the bones and the rocks in the river, in the ocean bed. This flashback ends, and Averill is brought back to see Ingvar communicating with Sedna. Ingvar walks into the mist a bear, and then out a man. In my notes I have here, ... is this David? But again, we get no name. This man introduced himself as the Hunter of Oomara. This confuses Sedna as well, and she says, "Oomara walking with the bears? What's going on?" So the hunter describes that he is in need of help. Averill's confused by this as well. He thinks that Oomara should not be walking with the bears either, but he knows that since he was chosen by this bear/man, he's there to witness and tell the story, and he decides to just wait and listen and have faith. The hunter tells Sedna that he needs help getting the Eye of Gwain at the bottom of the sea. Sedna is very hesitant and does not want to help, but in order to coax her and I would say almost manipulate her, Oomara brings out a comb that was made through shells with very fine teeth and starts combing her hair. This calms Sedna. She closes her eyes. He's getting sand beetles, crustaceans, everything out of her hair, the seaweed as well. She starts to feel beautiful again. And before she agrees, she says, "I cannot see my beauty. I cannot stroke my hair." And Oomara agrees that if he's brought the Eye of Gwain, he will bring back fingers for Sedna so that she may feel her beauty again. We're left off there with our own understanding that I believe a deal had been struck. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. Sedna did say that the Tooth of Ragnar is a sacred place, but she'll have to do it for a price. And that brings us to the end of that chapter. I'd very much like to see how Sedna is going to come into play besides just getting the eye for them, How is she going to get the eye? I thought Gwen had been pretty much turned to clay / stone. So she's just going to chip out a big, huge rock chunk of it. I have no idea. But here we go. That's the end of this section. I do have a question for you guys. Please hit me up. Either you can comment on YouTube, Spotify, you can send me in an email. One thing I would like to bring up is, hey, if you guys have a favorite dragon type Pokemon, what is it? Who is it? Is it a whole line or is it just one specific? I think mine's Garchomp because the first generation of Pokemon I ever played was Gen 4. So give me a comment. My email is gadzooks@gmail.com. I very much appreciate you guys hopping in for this short section this week. We will be next week covering the next couple of chapters, as well as a possible guest. So if you have any questions whatsoever, I'm here, or suggestions. Thank you for joining my journey. I hope to see you next week. Have a safe flight out and hit no turbulence.